This is part of a series of events we hope to be hosting over the course of this year to celebrate the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. In a moment, I'm going to call on my friend and colleague, Krish Raval, to introduce Rajmohan. We have this fantastic opportunity for a conversation with Mr. Gandhi, thanks to the great work of Krish and his Institute for Faith and Leadership at St. Bennett's Hall. So, Krish, please.
Well, thank you, Professor Ramanna. Faith in Leadership is delighted to co-host this evening with the Blavatnik School. We are based at St. Bennett's Hall, and I see the master and his colleague here, so Professor Richard Cooper, welcome. And our courses encourage leaders, particularly faith leaders, to transcend their echo chambers and intractable boundaries to show leadership for the common good. Trust building is central to our work and to good leadership. And I can think of few people more qualified to discuss this issue than Professor Rajmohan Gandhi. As a historian, he has penned critically acclaimed books and articles on reconciliation and democratic rights, and these have included famous biographies of Muslim icons, as well as those of his maternal grandfather, C. Rajagopalachari, the last Governor General of India, amongst other designations, and of course of his paternal grandfather, the Mahatma. Professor Gandhi has been a university professor, a member of the upper house of India's parliament, and with his wife Usha, whom we also welcome, he has spent a lifetime advancing efforts for reconciliation and democratic rights. India-Pakistan and Hindu-Muslim reconciliation have been a particular focus, and since 9/11, he has also addressed the divide between the West and the world of Islam. Perhaps less well known now about Professor Gandhi is that during the 1970s, he was editor-in-chief of the Indian periodical Himmat, meaning courage, which offered resistance against the emergency rule of Mrs. Gandhi. Courage, mixed with great intelligence and sensitivity, is a part of Professor Gandhi's fiber, and I have witnessed his building friendships with icons of leadership, such as Nelson Mandela and Dalai Lama, whom he has known. And I have seen him stand up to threatening crowds and deeply undemocratic policies, or court hugely unpopular positions, because this was the right thing to do. I have even experienced him subdue a crowd of obnoxious teenagers, of which I might have been a part. In this, I believe he has been influenced by the great work of Initiatives of Change, part influenced by the great work of Initiatives of Change, an international movement that draws the link between personal and global change. Initiatives of Change convened the first Franco-German dialogues after World War II, incubated the 12 steps of the Alcoholics Anonymous movement, and its stated mission is to build trust across the world's divides. Professor Gandhi is a former president of Initiatives of Change. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have here a statesman in every sense. Please welcome, in conversation, Professors Ramanna and Rajmohan Gandhi.
So just in terms of format, Rajmohan and I are going to have a conversation to kick this off, but we'd very much like to bring you into the conversation. So about maybe 10 or 15 minutes into this, I'll start looking to you for cues if you'd like to jump in. You will have to wait for the microphone so that we can make sure everyone hears you, and also this event is being streamed live so that it can go out as well. Great, fantastic. So Rajmohan, we're living in an era of deep distrust in society, and you've been a biographer and a chronicler of many periods in history, and you've studied periods of both deep distrust, but you've also studied periods of great trust in society, periods that enjoyed a great deal of harmony in society across what would otherwise be considered barriers. So as you reflect on that, what characterizes societies in history that have had a great deal of distrust from those that have enjoyed a great deal of trust?
So before I try to answer your question, after Krish spoke, I was trying to identify this person about whom he was speaking. Where is this person? Yes, I've studied Gandhi's life. I've studied Indian history over a somewhat longer period too. I've done a history of Punjab, the undivided Punjab, much of which went to Pakistan and some of it went to India in 1947. I've recently done a history of southern India, last 400 years, from the 17th century to our times. I have to say that most of the periods that I've studied have been periods of divides. Yes, there have been some short periods of unity, of harmony in society between different groups in society, some harmony between leaders and movements and peoples. So during the brief periods where there was unity or some kind of broad agreement where we're going, were marked by, let's say, some great goals, and great goals which were not just selfish goals for a few individuals, but great goals affecting everybody. They were marked by a leadership that also had won the trust of the people by and large. There was confidence that these leaders leading a movement were not in it for themselves. We may not agree with all that they said, but we don't doubt their goal, their aim. They were doing something for the common good. So this trust in the integrity, in the purpose, in the aims of the leadership was a very important factor. And great goals, if I'm referring to India during the freedom movement, during the freedom movement also had its ups and downs. It had some very bitter periods, but it had some wonderful periods. And during those periods, there was an amazing harmony between the different groups also. Unfortunately, that harmony was not long-lasting, but the Hindus and Muslims and non-Hindus and non-Muslims, the so-called upper caste, the so-called lower caste, the so-called untouchables, they all seemed to come together for these great aims. So great aims, trust in leadership, trust in the integrity of those who were summoning the people, these were some of the factors.
Fantastic. So not everyone here, Rajmohan, will be as well-versed in Gandhi's journey as you would as a biographer. So as we think about that journey, what strikes you, particularly if we tie it into this notion of building consensus across society, what strikes you as sort of the 2 or 3 most important decisions that you think enabled him to build that trust? Particularly if we view the product of his reputation and the trust as a consequence of these decisions, and we were to reverse engineer that and said, okay, here are 2 or 3 pivotal decisions that got him to the place where he could then have these conversations on the great goals that you talked about.
Of course, the first big decision in his personal life that many of you or any of you have studied his life aware of is when he was pushed out of the train shortly after arriving in South Africa as a young 23-year-old man. He was then didn't have any great purpose in his life, and he was on the point of returning to India. He had been pushed out, thrown out his goods, his clothes. It was a cold night in Pietermaritzburg, in Natal. And for some minutes, he thought of, well, why should I be here? I should go back. But he decided that he would stay and fight. So that was not an easy decision. The other day, somewhere in India, in Ahmedabad, I was speaking to a group of people about conquering fear and hate. And a young man came to me at the end and he said, "You speak so easily about conquering fear and hate, But during the last riots, this young man said, somebody pointed a gun at me, and I was very young. Can you talk so glibly about conquering fear and hate? So when I was thinking of Gandhi's decision, now Gandhi's decision wasn't quite as, it was not the point of a gun, but it was like a gun pointing. But he decided that he was going to fight back. So that was a personal decision, but I think a very important one, that you are ready for the toughest challenges in life. Then when he returned to India at the age of, in his mid-40s, for good, and at that time, mid-40s was an old age. But he came with a plan and a strategy that he was going, to fight for India's independence, political independence, and above all, he was going to fight for Hindus and Muslims to be together. And he was going to admit the so-called untouchables into his opening ashram, the opening center, where he was going to train the leadership of India. So from the very beginning, he had made this decision that it would be a fight for, India was to be for everybody. And although the Hindu-Muslim question was a tough one, an old one, a tough one, and he had evidence of it even in South Africa because there were Hindus and Muslims among the Indians in South Africa. And that the caste question, the untouchable question, the high caste question was a very deep one. But he had decided that he was going to go ahead with these goals without any hesitation, and he made these goals public from the very start. Another very major thing that he made public from the very start about his goals was that he would adhere to non-violence as his method. And people have written about Gandhi's non-violence in many ways, and of course people say at the end of his 30 years there was so much violence when India was divided. I may come to that at some point. But I wanted to mention one major factor in Gandhi's insistence on non-violence, because Gandhi had noticed, he was aware, he was always, people haven't understood this enough about Gandhi, that from childhood he was observant about life around him, Indian society, and that bullying, Gandhi had recognized, would make life impossible for the vulnerable Indian. There were many weak Indians, physically handicapped. He often referred to the lame, the blind, the halt, and how if violence and bullying became acceptable, even in India's fight against the British, it would become the norm in Indian society. So this again was a major decision he made, to which he adhered all his life, that his fight would be for non-violence. So these were some of the major decisions which I think did affect the future course of the movement.
But in the process of that, he also built some fairly unlikely coalitions.
Yes.
And I think as we try to draw, in some sense, inspiration from that for the moment that we're living in history today, the need for unlikely coalitions seems very salient. So help us understand those unlikely coalitions, and how did he go about that process?
One way of looking at his unlikely coalitions is to look at Free India's first cabinet. In August 1947, it was Nehru and Patel. These were the two men who mainly chose the cabinet, but there were many important inputs from Gandhi. There's lots of correspondence between Gandhi, recorded correspondence, apart from conversations they might have had, involving Gandhi, Nehru, and Patel. So in this cabinet of 14, there was only one woman, Rajkumari Amrit Kaur, but there were two Sikhs. She was one of them. There were Sardar Baldev Singh. There were two Muslims, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad and Rafi Ahmed Kidwai. There were two Dalits, Dr. Ambedkar, who had been a great opponent of his and of the Congress for many years, and Babu Jagjeevan Ram from Bihar. There were two Christians. There was Rajkumari Amrit Kaur, the Sikh, was also a Christian. She was a woman, she was a Christian, she was a Sikh. And then there was John Mathai from Kerala, who was a big executive with the Tatars, and he came in as a minister of the government. And then there was this man called R.K. Shanmukham Chetty, who was a strong pro-empire man. And he was taken in the first cabinet. And there was Shama Prasad Mukherjee of the Hindu Mahasabha, who was also taken into the first cabinet. So in some ways, if you want to summarize Gandhi's coalition building, that summary can be seen in this extraordinary cabinet of 14 when India became independent. So, and of course, it's important to note that apart from the leadership, which always, in Gandhi's case, the team that with him carried on various campaigns, was a team that represented various kinds of Indians by conscious design. But also, of course, and this is equally important to realize, that Gandhi fought, along with colleagues of his, for this kind of partnership also to take place in the community. So, when we talk about trust building, we sometimes think of trust building as between government and people, but far more important is trust building among the people. So much of Gandhi's life and campaign and struggle was to create trust among communities of various classes, races, linguistic groups, religious groups. Of course, his success was never complete. In some phases, it was astonishing. It appeared to shock people. Can this really happen? Of course, that kind of partnership or harmony across the board was never lasted for too long. But even if the success was not lasting or certainly not complete, it was quite impressive. And at least it became the norm. It was not a norm that was always realized, but for much of the time, the people of India felt that this is where we must get to, even though it is so difficult.
So this idea of deliberately constructing a coalition or a cabinet to reflect the diversity of the country. But let me probe that a little more and say, did he have to give up something dear to him in order to do that? Or it couldn't have come for free, could it?
I don't know what he had to give up, because it was such a deep, deep passion in him that India had to be for all, and therefore the leadership should reflect, as far as possible, everybody. It was, in practical terms, impossible, but you could at least convey that goal with a very powerful example. I mean, since, the important thing to recognize, Gandhi was not at all interested in being the president or the prime minister or the number one guy. I mean, if you say that, yes, he had to give up his personal ambitions, of course, that's a given. But I think beyond that, I think that kind of personal goal for himself, the desire for that kind of personal power, I don't know whether Gandhi ever really had that to give up. But he had, so I don't know whether he gave up a great goal for the sake of, yes, he had this organization, the Indian National Congress, of which he was for one short year a president, but he was the unquestioned leader of this for several years without holding a official position in it. Yes, he had to give up the Congress's monopoly. Yes, definitely. So when he had this former staunch advocate of the empire in the first cabinet of Free India, and he had Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, who had totally opposed the Indian National Congress for decades in the government. Of course, that was not his decision alone. Nehru and Patel were party to it. And to have John Mathai. So out of the 14, only 7 were from the Congress and 7 were from outside the Congress. So yes, he had to give up a predominant, powerful role for the Congress party.
Where I would also love to probe that is on this question of his own economic ideology, because I think some of that will tie into this conversation.
Yes.
I hope we get to around economic nationalism, because we're experiencing a resurgence of that in today's world. But Gandhi, in his own ideology, was a socialist, a collectivist, perhaps, in a way that perhaps the Indian government that emerged from independence didn't quite reflect. And certainly had Patel lived longer and had a greater influence in government, maybe the government, the kind of society that would have emerged in those first formative years might have looked quite different from the one that eventually evolved under the sort of unquestioned leadership of Nehru, who was perhaps closer to Gandhi's own ideology economically. So if we were to probe that question of the economic ideology of Gandhi, did he somehow see that as a trade-off, that he was willing to, in meeting this wider goal of saying building a cabinet or a leadership that reflected the diversity of society, so that, as you said, it would have an impact on trust across levels of society. People would look to that and aspire to that harmony. He had to give up on that economic, and is there a lesson there about trade-offs? Or
no, there's certainly bound to be trade-offs, but I think I would disagree with you in saying that Gandhi was a collectivist or a socialist. He was very strongly in favor of the individual independence, both in economics and in politics and in constitution making. And so this again is a less recognized aspect of Gandhi, is his very strong passion for individual rights. Nehru was undoubtedly a socialist. In fact, some economic policies, Gandhi and Patel were closer to each other than, but yes, Gandhi was prepared for some state intervention and some socialistic policies also. Yes, there had to be, but different people had to give up on their pet concerns, their pet goals in order for a united face to be presented to the Indian people. So I think beyond, but we can discuss the economic nationalism question if you want, if I may then. So yes, Gandhi's economic nationalism has to be also understood because it has many nuances. After his first period of imprisonment in India, from 22 to 24, he was for 2 years. He was sentenced for 6 years, but he was ill, and so he was released after 2 years. There was an English nurse at this place after the hospital attached to the prison. So Gandhi is released, and this English nurse accompanies Gandhi out of prison. And she tells him, see, you've been asking for boycott of British cloth, of British things, but you have had instruments made in Britain for this surgery. He had an appendicitis surgery. I'm an English woman. I've been nursing you. And this umbrella that you're holding over your head as you walk under the sun from the prison gate to your transport, this umbrella was made in England. So Gandhi says to her, wait a minute, let me explain to you my economic nationalism. I'm not against British goods. I want all foreign cloth to be boycotted, whether it's Japanese, Chinese, American, Russian. And I want the hand-spun cloth to become the national cloth of India and all Indians to wear the cloth. Why do I want that? Because I want every Indian to be a producer, not to be a consumer only. I want the poor person to be able to make this. And he gave his understanding of why he wanted self-reliance on the part of the individual, not just the nation. And it was not an anti-British thing. It was for the sake of the poor people of India that I'm advocating this. I'm summarizing this conversation, but at the end of this, the English nurse said, well, I think I might buy some of this khadi myself. So his economic nationalism had a very strong connection with humanity being one. And Gandhi was as much for trust building between the Indian people and the British people as he was for trust building between the Hindus and the Muslims, the high castes and the low castes. This also is something perhaps worth recognizing.
And how, in your mind, does that form of economic nationalism, say, for instance, distinguish itself from the ones we're seeing today, perhaps from the Trump administration? On a very basic level, one will say, well, they're both addressing productivity asymmetries across societies, and
Yeah.
they're trying to equilibrate wages in the face of,
Yes.
barriers.
Yes. I think even today there's something about Trump, about a new slogan for America, about where does somebody remember?
Make America great.
No, that. No, make America great again, of course. But there's something else today. It's about distrusting the world. It's something. Be careful about the world. So there is. I forget the actual words. I read them in a hurry, but there is a kind of caution, warning about the bad world outside and the wicked world they're about to do us in. That wasn't Gandhi's approach. Yeah. He was asking Indians to be self-reliant, to be proud, of course, to be honest also about themselves, to be united if they could, but never because they were to face a hostile world. So that was a very important part of Gandhi's message. It was the Indian people should be confident, not because they face a terrible, terrible hostile world, but because they have to play their part. And they can only play their part in helping the world forward if they are themselves independent, if they are self-sufficient to the extent possible. So the negativity towards the world was missing in Gandhi's nationalism.
That's a fantastic insight, and I'm going to pull up on that in a moment, but I also want to prime the audience to say, right after this, I'd love to turn to you for questions. So do prepare yourself if you'd like to ask a question. But let's just pick up on that last thought, because this idea of creating the other is something that we are increasingly seeing in the world today, and the notion that you need a shared antagonist in order to unite a divided society is what many people are championing as sort of the solution to, say, America's woes or Britain's woes and so forth. And worrisomely, that's becoming popular even amongst moderates who are championing this idea of it. And they've got fancy terms for it, like inclusive nationalism and this and that. But the idea that there has to be another and there isn't another, then there isn't a way actually to unite a divided society. So how central was the idea of the shared antagonist, in this case, the British occupier, right, to Gandhi's success in unifying India in the 20s, when he was doing much of the groundwork for his eventual success in independence?
There's no doubt that the fact that there was an adversary, or sometimes referred to as an enemy, the colonizer, the imperial power ruling over India, that certainly was a very powerful influence. Nobody can deny that. But again and again, Gandhi tried, and sometimes successfully, sometimes unsuccessfully. There's an amazing story. It'll take me too much time to relate the story. After the terrible Jallianwala Bagh thing, April 1919, December, April 19, the Indian National Congress, by previous design, met in Amritsar, the place where the tragedy had taken place some months earlier, and there was a resolution against the British, citing Jallianwala. But then Gandhi introduced an amendment to the resolution in which he said we must also deplore the violence that took place on April 10, 3 days before the April 13 massacre, in which 5 young Englishmen were killed in Amritsar. Yeah, most people in India don't know about it. We are not aware that this had happened. And Gandhi insisted on that, and according to people who were present at that time, he made a spirited defense. He made the speech of his life, as if his life would depend on it, that we must deplore this as well. And he succeeded on that occasion. But there were other occasions. The notion that India's fight for independence was always completely non-violent is not true. There were several occasions when individual Britons were actually killed, not by people who belonged to Gandhi's movement, but those who were angry enough, they thought that, yeah, we should And every time this happened, whenever the International Congress had a session, Gandhi would ask for deploring these attacks or attempts. And he would be very strongly opposed. Very strongly opposed. And at times he was outvoted. But again and again he fought. He wanted this to be absolutely plain that, and yes, he was on record saying that if the British were to play absolutely fair by Indians, then India and Britain should have a wonderful partnership in the world. Yes, he also felt that the Commonwealth could be a great force in the world, but India could be the leader of the Commonwealth because of the large population. So while what's your phrase, the very interesting phrase about the common enemy? You had
the shared antagonist.
The shared, much more dignified phrase. That certainly was a factor that made millions of people join the movement. But there was always, whenever Gandhi had the opportunity, he made it absolutely plain that this is the enmity is not on, that we have to work together to build a better world.
Fantastic. Great. Let's open it up and take some questions from the group. So raise your hand if you have a question. I'll point to you, and then they'll bring a mic over. So we'll take 2 or 3 questions at a time. So let's take the gentleman in the jacket, and then there's a question right behind you as well when you're done.
Good evening. I was in Punjab recently and read the Hindu Times about Churchill and Gandhi's relationship, and how Churchill seemed implacably opposed to everything Gandhi did and stood for, including, I think, introducing him about the fast he went on, and Churchill said, oh, he was given glucose and all this kind of thing. Can you sort of shed some light on their relationship?
Fantastic. Great. And there was a question right behind yeah.
Hi, this is probably an uncomfortable question, but please assume best intentions. It is becoming increasingly clear that that our popular discourse has hugely exaggerated the inclusiveness in Gandhi's political thinking. He is on record calling the caste system the genius of Hindu society, and has made extremely racist remarks about black South Africans as well. Given this context, do you think there are any limitations in centering our conversation around trust building around Gandhi?
Okay, great. We'll take one more question if there's a question on that side, Jolie. Yeah, thank you.
Good evening. Your forebear Gandhi accused the British of destroying the beautiful tree of village education in India. And we, the colonial power, brought in our Western model. And yet today, my research is in Africa, but low-cost non-state schools are actually coming up from the community and educating a lot of children in Africa and India. And I just wonder what your thinking is on the role that they can play as partner with government, as opposed to in adversarial relationship with government, because they are from the community, they tend to be trusted by the community. How can we enhance that for the benefit of the community?
Great. Okay, so 3 very good questions.
And each different from the other.
Yeah. I'll let you take them in whichever turn you...
Sure, sure. So I'll take them in the order in which they were asked. On Churchill and Gandhi, fascinating relationship. The quotes are well known from Churchill particularly about Gandhi. It's interesting that in September of 47, shortly after India was independent, and when terrible killings were indeed taking place, and Churchill had made a very strong statement, which was published in the Indian newspapers. Also, this sometime in September of 1947, when he spoke about the killings in India and the massacres that were taking place. And Churchill predicted that India's population would shrink into something very small because of these massacres. And then Gandhi, as so many of you know, his practice in these final years of his life was to hold these multi-faith prayer meetings and then to give his views, including on political questions at the end in a short talk, which was often then in the newspapers or even on the radio. So Gandhi translated sentence by sentence Churchill's strictures about the killings in India. And then he said that he was sad that Churchill had made these remarks and seemed to be relishing the killings in India. And he also suggested that Churchill has exaggerated. But and then he told the audience that no matter the exaggeration we might see in Churchill's remarks, the killings are a reality, and we have to prove Churchill wrong. And then a very interesting statement, Churchill did save the British Empire in World War II. This was his statement to the people of India. So, and when he was in 1931 in the UK, his first only visit after he left South Africa, he tried to meet Churchill and he was unwilling to meet Gandhi at that time. But Gandhi, he was always aware that Churchill was reluctant to part with India. There was enough evidence of that. And yes, Churchill is on record also telling the Viceroy that he was very disappointed that Gandhi hadn't died after release. He was supposed to be so ill. Why hasn't he died yet? But I think with all that, Gandhi did appreciate Churchill's astonishing qualities. So it's a very short summary of the Gandhi-Churchill relationship. On your very important question, what you say is correct, but it has to be taken in its context. And Gandhi's remarks, which were undoubtedly unfortunate and poor and deplorable about the South African blacks, and some of these were connected with his unhappy experiences in prison with fellow Africans who were in prison with him. They were convicts. He was a convict. He was a convict for political reasons. They were convicts for other reasons. And some of them were indeed behaving in a very, you might say, unimpressive fashion. And Gandhi has recorded also in detail of what happened in these conversations. But yes, Gandhi was certainly very poorly informed. He was prejudiced about black Africans in South Africa for a good deal of the time. But he also had amazing good relations with black South Africans, including with John Dewey, one of the founders of the African National Congress. And Dewey and Gandhi had their centers in the same place in Phoenix, outside Durban. And you perhaps know of Albert Luthuli, the great African National Congress leader. And he also knew John Dewey. And there is a statement by Luthuli in the museum, Luthuli Museum in Durban, which refers to Dewey's relationship with Gandhi. And the conversation that people have had with Dewey in 1912, 1913 about what the black Africans, how they were inspired by the Indian movement led by Gandhi, are also part of the record. So, this discovery now. So if Gandhi was a racist, which of course he was not, he was prejudiced, he was poorly informed. Yes, absolutely true. But so were so many others at the time. But the idea that Gandhi was a racist is an absolute travesty of history. Yes, he was. The word racist is in my assessment, absolutely inappropriate. And the important thing to know, subsequently, also Gandhi's relationship with African Americans from the United States. His first African-American interlocutor was actually in 1893, the year Gandhi arrived in South Africa. So it's there in the autobiography, although Gandhi doesn't name the man. But he had a very interesting encounter with this African-American. And this continued from 1917. There was a man called Hubert Harrison who wrote in America about Gandhi's movements and what the African-Americans had to learn. So if Gandhi was such a racist, why would Mandela say good things about him? Why would Albert Luthuli say such amazing things about him? Why would John Dewey say such things about Gandhi? So let us not, because of our discovery of, and where is this discovery from? It is from Gandhi's own records, Gandhi's letters. So we certainly can assess that Gandhi was very inadequate. He was certainly imperfect. that he was not as progressive in some of his utterances as we would have liked him to be, but in the context of his time and place, he was extraordinarily non-racist. And so that is my comment on that. On education and the community, of course, what you say is absolutely true, that educational experiments that generated by a community at the ground level are the most solid, most reliable way in which education can go forward helpfully, of course in partnership with government introduced, government-run schools. So I mean, as far as education is concerned, anybody that can play any role, and in a country like India with these incredible challenges, I've already mentioned the fact of so many disabilities affecting millions of children, psychological, medical, mental. I think we don't realize what an enormous challenge India faces in that field. So I thank you for mentioning this very important need.
Okay, great. Well, let's take some more questions. We've got, we'll take one in the back there, and then one up front here, and then we'll come there. So we'll do those three. But yeah, let's start in whatever order, wherever you're closest. Yeah, great.
Hello, thank you for today. From what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Gandhi was nominated 6 times, apparently, for Nobel Prize, and you didn't get it once. What do you have to say about that?
Okay, we'll take 3 at a time.
Sure.
Okay, great. Yeah, and so it was the gentleman who has his hand up right there. Jolie, right there. Oh, okay, yeah.
Hi, I just wanted to ask what you see maybe the way forward currently, given the level of discrimination against Muslims in India. How do you see what Gandhi kind of, his ways, do you see any relevance in how that might actually bring about some sort of better reconciliation? That's it, thank you.
Thank you. Can you pass it right behind you? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Gandhi, for being here. It's a real privilege. I wanted to ask about current Indian politics. The BJP has shown itself to be a really national level party with support across the country, winning an even larger majority than they did in the last election, whereas the Congress's support seems to be dwindling. I wanted to ask, why hasn't a new, younger, centrist or leftist party been able to emerge at the national level in parts all across India? The Aam Aadmi Party seemed promising at a certain point, but it hasn't managed to expand that far. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got 2 questions on sort of contemporary Indian scenario, one on the state of Muslims and one on the political organization. So let's just come back to this question here. Yeah. Do you have a mic with you? No, not yet? Okay. Can we just bring a mic to this gentleman right there? Thank you.
I don't know how much you follow of British politics, but if Gandhi were a British politician, how do you think he would grapple with the situation we're facing at the moment?
Okay, great.
Okay.
You want to start with the Nobel Prize?
Yes, I will try.
Work our way to...
So, well, to be honest, this is not an area that I've investigated. I don't even know whether Gandhi was nominated 6 times or not. He might have been. Why he was not awarded it is something that, frankly, has not interested me too much. I certainly would not have interested Gandhi the slightest. And it doesn't interest me also. I think that if Gandhi had been awarded the Nobel Prize, it would have been done something very good for the Nobel Prize system. But the fact that he didn't get it is not a regret in me at all. So, however, it may be with some others, but at least I'm offering you my view. But on India today, the Muslims and the lack of impressive enough, exciting enough opposition to the BJP. Okay, I'll try these. I think when you mentioned the need for the other, this is something I'm afraid that India too has fallen for. And so much of India's politics and so much of the success of the BJP is founded on this notion that India faces this threat from within. And sometimes it is specified who the threat is from, and the Muslims, M-U-S-L-I-M letters are spelled out. At other times, it's very clearly indicated, and you know exactly who's being spoken of. And this is definitely a very sad moment in India's story. And the anti-Muslimness that is so prominent in India is absolutely intertwined with a very strong negative view about Gandhi. So the present Indian Parliament has at least 12, if not more, members who are of the view that the killer of Gandhi deserves greater importance than Gandhi. So this is a very interesting situation that we have arrived at in India. And I think Gandhi himself would say that forget about my reputation, I couldn't care less if I'm regarded as no good, but I am certainly very unhappy if the Muslims of India are to be regarded as second-class citizens. And this is certainly the situation today. So now this, of course, is in line with a pattern in the world. So I think we have to see that whether it's in the UK, whether it is India, whether it is Poland, whether it's Hungary, whether it's Turkey, whether it's the United States, whether it is Brazil, in so many parts of the world, there is this notion that there is some group within the nation, some national group within the nation which owns the nation more than others do. England belongs more to us than to others. America belongs more to us than to others. India belongs more to us than to others. Let's take our country back. So this is a dominant theme worldwide today. And the people from whom the country is to be taken back, sometimes the Muslims, sometimes the other immigrants, sometimes some other races, some other religious group, some other sectarian group within Islam at times. So and then along with this notion of having an enemy group, there is this also an availability of some face and some voice that is ever present, that is present everywhere, and who's supposed to be so witty and so smart and such a terrific orator and such a wonderful abuser of people. And so, hey, great, he speaks as the way he feels like speaking. So this is a current today in the world. But I think what I wanted to state, that along with this current, which is an undoubted reality and a frightening reality in the world, there is this other reality which I witnessed when I arrived in London 2 days ago on the streets. And as I drove today from London to here. The people that I see wherever I look in this country, are people of so many different races, of so many different kinds of people, most of them walking along quite happily together, content, purposeful, excited about what they're doing. So while on the one hand, we seem to be retreating from humanity to our tribe, on the other hand, the humanity, which includes everybody, is also out there. And I don't know when this other reality will take over and become dominant. I'm no good at predicting this. It may take a long time for all one knows. It may not, on the other hand. The other reality is a strong factor, as strong, if not stronger, than what we see and what pains us. So this is what I would say. But on India, I absolutely agree with you that it is painful beyond description what is happening today. And so, and a great many people don't see it in India, or if they see it, they don't bother about it. But I would like to believe that a great many people actually don't see it, and that the actual support for this idea that some people should dominate the others, some people are more Indian than the others, that idea is not shared by, certainly by a majority. It's only shared, it's shared passionately, but still by a relatively small group. But how we deal with this? So on why the opposition parties, the Congress or the Aam Aadmi Party or the left parties have not succeeded, it's not so easy to say. It's like asking why has the Democratic Party not succeeded? Why is the Labour Party not doing so well in the UK? The similar questions could be asked about many other parts of the world. And it's true that a man like Narendra Modi is a very hard-working man. And he's on the job all the time, and he has, of course, great resources. That's another matter. But, yes, a very major factor in the failure of democratic politics in India is the inability of outstanding democratic leaders to have teamwork with one another. This again was, in Gandhi's time, Nehru, Patel, Ambedkar, others, with all their sharp differences, did work together amazingly. But I've seen in my own lifetime in the last several years, I've also, as was mentioned, I've had some direct relationship with political life. And I've seen how wonderful people who are Democrats, but within a few months, they are not able to work together. And the ego clashes. I want to be number one. Why should I be number two? It's unbelievable how these very simple human desires have wrecked opportunities for democratic consolidation and the right kind of party to succeed. And this has also happened in the left movement. And it's also true, as far as the left movement is concerned, the failure of the left to recognize the caste question in India. The thought that there was something called class, which was the dominant thing in the world. It was the only thing that mattered. But of course, that was not true for Indian society. So the left made some very serious blunders.
Help us solve Brexit through Gandhi's eyes. That was the...
Yes, last. So, I think Gandhi would want everyone to be able to recognize the truth or the justice in the other side also. For instance, I was saying to myself, I was actually talking to somebody who was from Afghanistan who was driving the taxi into which I came here. So I said, where I see the Afghans, the Pakistanis, the Indians, the Africans, the people from the West Indies, where are the English, in London. So I think those of us who come from other parts of the world to the UK must recognize that this incredible country is welcoming all of us. We flourish. We become rich here. And what a history this country has. For democracy, Magna Carta, Shakespeare, Shelley, Keats. My God. And these people from England who came to India, learned our languages, wrote our dictionaries, wrote the grammars for Telugu, Tamil, Marathi, Kannada, Malayalam, came at the age of 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And they went to colonize the world, and now the world is colonizing the UK. Let us admire what is there in the UK to admire. There is so much. It is present in its past. But then, let the whites in the UK also appreciate what is being brought. The talent, the ability, the ingenuity, the willingness to work hard, the music, the food, Yes, it may have taken you a couple of 100 years to appreciate Indian food. But what a fabulous collection of ability, goodness, virtue you have in the UK. I mean, this is a fantastic country. Absolutely fabulous country. So I've given Rajmohan Gandhi's view. I don't know whether it's N.K. Gandhi's view.
Fantastic. Let's take a, perhaps this will be our final round of questions. I see a number of hands up. I'd like to, wear my hat as MPP director and call on some MPP students or Master of Public Policy students. So let's start with right up here. Go for it.
Thank you very much, Professor, for coming to our school. Thank you and for sharing these lessons with us. What we like going to the some of the discussion that you had earlier. My question is, how can we build like compassion and bring civility to public service? Because we have seen this like all this kind of populist way, but it needs to start with somewhere. How can we like bring solutions to those problems of restoring civility in our public service? Thank you.
Civility in public life. Okay, fantastic. The lady there, and then we'll take Garima over in the back. But so, Jolie, the lady in the pink top, yeah. Or is it purple? Lavender, maybe. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Just to put a note on something which is happening at the moment, I wonder how Gandhi would have reacted to the non-violent movements that are rising from the climate crisis today.
Okay, great. And Garima, just if you pass the mic back there. Thank you.
Hello. I might not be very articulate because I'm thinking out loud as I frame this question. So I grew up in India reading NCERT textbooks, which started with Gandhiji's Talisman. And I imbibed it into my life. I grew up as a very idealistic person, loving Gandhi. But one conversation with my father just ruins that idealism. And my question to you is this idea of unity and diversity ingrained in the Indian society, or is it something that we propagate as a myth? If so, then does the election results in the recent years come as a surprise to us? And what can we do to build trust in the society going forward?
Okay, great. Those are some meaty questions. We'll take one right up front here, and then we'll close with that one. So if we can just bring a mic right up front here. Thank you, Jolie.
Professor Gandhi, thank you so much for your thoughtful words today. Let's take two assumptions. First, that the world has always seen a pendulum effect, left, right, hope, hopelessness, content, discontent, Gandhiji's irrelevance, relevance. So we'll just park that and assume that. Let's also assume, in your lovely phrasing, that we do have a shared antagonist. The question earlier about climate change.
Climate change, yes, very good.
So with that framing, my wife and I were blessed with our first grandchild earlier this year. Let's not look at the last 150 years. Let's fast forward to Gandhiji's 175th or 200th birthday, our granddaughter's 25th or 50th birthday. Practically, what advice would you have in terms of raising a child with a Gandhian worldview? Gandhian, Rajmohan Gandhi, Gandhian, M.K. Gandhi.
Great, fantastic. Okay. Maybe start with the civility. I mean, there's a lot here,
yes,
so and maybe we can weave the climate change with this question, so that because in the interest of time,
yes,
yeah.
Right. So on civility, and here let me also mention that we were talking about India. I'm sure it's true also of other countries, equally true. Even in today's rather pessimistic climate in India, you have wonderful examples of a civil servant, a policeman somewhere, a judge somewhere, some other official somewhere, meting out justice and being helpful and risking a good deal to be helpful. So there have been such wonderful examples, not only of civility, but of constructive goodness and of giving out justice on the part of the average civil servant. So the administrator and the civil servant or the political leader who comes to Blavatnik has a tremendous opportunity. So, of course, it does really ultimately depend on the individual commitment of the person. We also take oaths, of course, when we enter a job or enter parliament or whatever. But even without oaths, we have our consciences, we have our minds, we have our judgment, we have a sense of calling. So I have a very great expectation from public servants. So I'm very glad that you mentioned that. On climate change, I think Gandhi would be a foot soldier in any non-violent march today for climate change, for working to prevent the disaster or to mitigate the disaster that is ahead of us. And I think we know enough about that. Although here, I think this is a good chance for me to make one important correction. Everybody thinks that this famous statement, there's enough in the world for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed, is from M.K. Gandhi. It certainly describes M.K. Gandhi's views quite correctly, but that statement is not his to begin with. And here, if I may take the chance to make this announcement, or rather clarification, or whatever the word is, this statement first came from Frank Bookman of Initiatives of Change. First made in 1938.
Right.
So I'm glad to, but yes, Gandhi absolutely would today be marching alongside those who want to prevent our reckless greed from destroying our lives. Now, on how to raise a child, I think my wife may have better ideas. Our two children who will tell you that their father certainly has very little idea of how to raise children. We have one fantastic grandson who is 6.5. He's our only grandchild. And his parents are, like all of you, extremely busy. So these days, often he finds in me his chief playmate. But I am, you have just had a grandchild. So first of all, let me congratulate you. I think it's wonderful news. And I think for us to end this particular phase of our conversation together by reflecting on the future life of this precious grandchild, what can be more important than that? So the arrival of a child like that, with all its challenges, I think it's a great chance for us to strengthen our faith, our optimism, and of course we'll do whatever we can to make the world a better place for him or her or him. Yes, I think all our countries have seen some days that are far more precarious than today. And we have emerged in good condition out of those. So I'll stop with that.
Great. Before we conclude, I do want us to turn our lens inward, and in particular, to focus your wisdom on the project that is the Blavatnik School of Government and what it is we're doing here. So each year, as you know, we bring together 120 remarkable individuals from about 60 countries who are united by a shared purpose of commitment to public service. And what lesson do you think we must absolutely include or incorporate in the curriculum I hope the answer is we're already doing that, but what lesson do you think that, given our shared mission, we should absolutely have as part of the curriculum?
Well, I don't know about the curriculum, but I would say this, that courage to do what is right is perhaps the greatest morality. And all of us face very difficult situations, and we certainly need prudence and we need wisdom. At times we may need caution, circumspection. But ultimately, I think we must be ready to do whatever, to take the right step, no matter what it costs. I think that is really the spirit that deep down perhaps animates every single one of us.
Thank you. And that is, in some sense, the highest responsibility of the privilege of being part of a community like this. All that remains then for me is to ask you, ladies and gentlemen, to join me in thanking Mr. Rajmohan Gandhi. And his wife, Usha, who have taken the trip here. Such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.